Come Home, Death, by Janson Davies. Chapter 1. The Harvest. The wind was still, not the kind of stillness that precedes a storm, but the kind that follows a final breath. In a hospice room in Nairobi, a grandmother smiled at nothing, her eyes fixed on a memory only she could see. In a Tokyo subway, a man clutched his chest and collapsed between strangers who didn't know his name. In a Montana field, a boy whispered goodbye to his horse before the world went quiet. And in each place, he was there. The Grim Reaper did not walk. He arrived, a shadow without footsteps, a presence without sound, cloaked in black, face hidden beneath a hood that swallowed light. He moved through the veil between worlds with the ease of a sigh. His scythe was not a weapon. It was a key. With each soul he touched, the blade shimmered, not with blood, but with mercy. He did not judge. He did not mourn. He simply harvested what was ripe. Death was not cruel. He was necessary. He moved from soul to soul, collecting them gently, like a librarian shelving books that had reached their final chapter. He paused only once, at the bedside of a child in Rio, who looked up at him and asked, "Will it hurt?" "No," he said, though his voice was not heard. It was felt. And then as he reached for the child's soul, the sky cracked. A beam of light, white, cold, and impossibly vast, pierced the ceiling, the clouds, the atmosphere. It wrapped around Death like a lasso of gravity, pulling him upward with a force that defied every law he had ever obeyed. The scythe slipped from his hand. The souls he had gathered scattered like stardust, and for the first time in eternity, Death was taken. Chapter 2. The Prize. The beam of light tore through dimensions, bypassing gravity, time, and resistance. It was not a weapon. It was a summons. Death ascended. He did not struggle. He could not. His essence, ancient, immutable, was bound by laws older than stars. And yet this force was older still. It pulled him beyond the veil, past the edge of the solar system, into a vessel that defied geometry. Inside, the air shimmered with colorless light. The walls pulsed like living skin. Symbols danced across surfaces that had no edges. The beings who stood before him were not humanoid. They were conceptual, shifting forms of crystalline logic and fluid geometry, their voices a chorus of harmonic equations. They had no eyes, yet they saw him. They had no mouths, yet they spoke. "You are the harvester." The final function, the entropy incarnate. Death said nothing. He had never needed to speak to be understood. "We have watched your work across millennia. You are the rarest artifact in the cosmos, a force that cannot be replicated, only revered." They circled him, not with worship, but with awe. One extended a limb, if it could be called that, and touched the edge of his cloak. It recoiled instantly, its form fracturing like glass. "Your power does not affect us. We are beyond your reach. That makes you safe. That makes you collectible." Death looked down at his empty hand. The scythe was gone. The souls were gone. The silence he carried was broken by the hum of alien curiosity. They led him through corridors that bent space into a chamber of impossible beauty. A throne carved from collapsed stars, a crown of frozen time, a palace built to house a god. And for the first time in eternity, Death felt something unfamiliar. Relief. No cries, no pleas, no burden of endings, just stillness. "You will reside here, honored and unbound." The Reaper retired. Outside the ship, Earth spun on, unaware that its final function had vanished. And somewhere in a hospital, a man flatlined but did not die. Chapter 3. The Stillness. At first, no one noticed. Hospitals marked anomalies. Patients who should have passed on lingered in limbo. heart monitors frozen in erratic patterns, bodies unresponsive but stubbornly alive. Coroners reported delays, morgues filled with the undying. The data was dismissed as error, coincidence, miracle. But then came the silence. No funerals, no obituaries, no last breaths. Across continents, people began to whisper. In Delhi, a man survived a train collision with half his body crushed, awake, screaming but unable to die. In Chicago, a cancer ward overflowed with patients whose tumors grew unchecked, yet whose lives refused to end. In Lagos, a child drowned and was pulled from the river hours later, blue-lipped, waterlogged, and blinking. Death had vanished, and the world began to rot. Governments convened emergency councils, scientists ran simulations, religious leaders wept. The Vatican declared it a divine pause. Silicon Valley called it a glitch in the simulation. The UN called it a crisis of humanity. Riots broke out in cities where pain had no exit. Suicide attempts became permanent injuries. War zones turned into grotesque museums of suffering. The wounded did not heal, the dying did not die, the living could not grieve. And still, no one knew why. In a bunker beneath Geneva, a quantum physicist stared at a monitor tracking metaphysical anomalies. A spike in entropy, a missing constant. "Something's gone," she whispered. "Something fundamental." Above her, the stars turned slowly, and far beyond them, in a palace of alien light, Death reclined on a throne of silence, watching galaxies swirl, unaware that Earth had begun to scream. Chapter 4. The Alien Palace. The throne was carved from collapsed stars, its surface smooth, cold, and humming with ancient gravity. Death sat upon it, motionless. Not out of respect, but out of confusion. He had never rested before. The palace around him shimmered with impossible architecture. Hallways folded into themselves, light bent sideways, time dripped from the ceiling like condensation. The aliens, beings of logic and elegance, moved in patterns that resembled music more than motion. They brought him gifts. A robe woven from dark matter, a crown forged from the silence between supernovae, a chalice filled with liquid memory. They bowed before him, not in fear but in admiration. He was not a threat here. He was a trophy. "You are the final function," they said, "the end of all things. We have removed you from the cycle. You are free." Death did not speak. He had no mouth. But he felt something stir, a flicker of unease. He wandered the palace, passing rooms filled with artifacts from extinct civilizations, a library of forgotten languages, a garden of extinct stars, a gallery of lost gods. He was now one of them. Outside, the cosmos spun on. Planets died, stars collapsed. But Earth had stopped. He could not feel it, not directly, but something was missing. A tug, a whisper, the pull of souls reaching for release. That silence, once sacred, now felt wrong. And yet the aliens celebrated. They threw feasts in his honor. They composed symphonies of entropy. They debated his metaphysical implications. He was their greatest acquisition. Death sat on his throne, surrounded by wonders, and felt the weight of nothing. Chapter 5. The Council of the Living. The emergency summit convened in Geneva beneath a sky that refused to mourn. Delegates from every nation arrived in silence. No motorcades, no fanfare, just grim faces and sleepless eyes. The world had not seen war in weeks, not because peace had prevailed, but because soldiers no longer died. Battles became endless, wounds became permanent. The cost of conflict was no longer measured in lives, but in suffering. Inside the summit chamber, the air was thick with dread. The Secretary-General of the United Nations stood before a wall of screens displaying global data. Population curves spiking, hospital capacities breached, food reserves dwindling. A map of the world pulsed red. "We are facing a crisis of permanence," she said. "Death has vanished, and with it, mercy." A hush fell over the room. The Vatican envoy clutched his rosary. The Chinese ambassador stared at his hands. The U.S. president leaned forward, voice low. "We need to find out where it went. Not what, not why, but where." A team of quantum physicists, metaphysicians, and intelligence analysts presented their findings: a spike in entropy, a rupture in metaphysical constants, a beam of unknown origin traced to deep space. "Something took it," said the lead physicist. "Something abducted death." The room erupted, not in disbelief, but in grim recognition. The world had seen stranger things, and now it faced the strangest of all. A plan was formed. Satellites were reprogrammed. Deep space probes were launched. A coalition of nations pooled resources to build a vessel, not for war, but for retrieval. "We will bring death home," the Secretary General declared, "by diplomacy or force." Outside, the streets of Geneva filled with the undying. Protesters with bullet wounds, children with tumors, veterans with shattered limbs. They did not chant. They did not scream. They simply held signs that read, "Let us rest in peace." Chapter 6. The Eternal Moment. Death wandered the palace alone. The aliens had given him everything: comfort, reverence, freedom from duty. But the silence was no longer sacred. It was sterile. He passed through halls of frozen time, gardens of extinct stars, and libraries of forgotten gods. Each artifact was a monument to something that had once mattered, and yet none of it lived. He paused before a mirror that reflected nothing: not his cloak, not his scythe, not even the absence he carried. He was invisible here, not feared, not needed, just admired. "You are free," the aliens reminded him. "No more burdens, no more endings." But death was not built for freedom. He was built for balance. He reached out instinctively for the pull of a soul. Nothing came, no whisper, no release, just the echo of suffering. And then the images arrived, projected across the palace walls: Earth in agony, a woman in a coma, eyes open but vacant, a soldier with half a face, screaming without breath, a child with terminal cancer, trapped in a body that refused to let go. The aliens had intercepted Earth's transmissions: news broadcasts, emergency pleas, a montage of pain. Death watched in silence. He saw the riots, the overcrowded cities, the morgues filled with the undying. He saw the signs held by the suffering: "Let us rest in peace." And something ancient stirred within him: not guilt, not sorrow, purpose. He turned from the throne. The crown fell from his head. The robe of dark matter unraveled behind him. The aliens watched, puzzled. "You are honored here. Why return to suffering?" Death did not answer. He simply walked through the palace, through the corridors of light, toward the edge of the ship where space bent into time. He had seen enough. Earth had called, and death was listening. Chapter 7. The Ultimatum. The vessel was unlike anything Earth had ever launched. Forged from repurposed satellites, quantum engines, and salvaged alien tech from past encounters, it was a patchwork miracle: ugly, fast, and desperate. The Coalition named it Mercy One, its mission to retrieve death. Inside, a crew of diplomats, scientists, and soldiers stared at the stars with hollow eyes. They had seen what immortality looked like. It wasn't paradise. It was purgatory. As Mercy's touch approached the coordinates traced from entropy spikes, the alien palace came into view: a structure of impossible geometry, orbiting a dead star like a crown on a corpse. Contact was made. A transmission pulsed through space, decoded by Earth's best minds. The aliens responded not with hostility, but with curiosity. You seek the Harvester. He resides here, honored and unbound. Earth's envoy, a former hospice nurse turned diplomat, spoke with trembling resolve. He must return. Our world is unraveling. Without death there is no mercy, no closure, no peace. The aliens considered this. Their reply was clinical. Your suffering is a function of attachment. You should evolve beyond endings. The envoy leaned forward, voice sharp. We didn't ask to evolve. We asked to live, and living means dying. Silence. Then Earth issued its ultimatum. Return him, or we come for him. The aliens laughed, or something like it. A ripple of harmonic distortion. You cannot harm us. Your weapons are irrelevant. Your mortality is your weakness. The envoy's eyes burned. We are no longer mortal. We cannot die, and that makes us dangerous. The transmission ended. Inside the alien palace, Death sat in stillness. He had heard every word. He had seen the images, the suffering, the riots, the signs. Let us rest in peace. And for the first time in eternity, he stood, not as a relic, but as a reckoning. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. The palace was quiet, not the reverent quiet of worship, but the hollow quiet of irrelevance. Death stood at the edge of the throne room, watching alien attendants rearrange constellations like furniture. They no longer bowed. They no longer stared. The novelty had faded. He was no longer a mystery. He was a possession. And yet, something had changed. The images from Earth, broadcasts of agony, still frames of suffering, had pierced the veil. They played in his mind like echoes. A child in a hospital bed, eyes wide with pain. A man impaled on rebar, screaming for release. A woman trapped in a burning building, scorched by flame but unable to escape. Death felt their pull, not as a summons, but as a reminder. He walked the palace corridors, past the gallery of extinct gods. He paused before a sculpture of a being once worshipped as time. Its face was cracked. Its hands were missing. Its eyes were closed. You were forgotten, Death whispered, but I am remembered and needed. He turned to the nearest alien, a being of shifting geometry and crystalline logic. I must leave. The alien shimmered in confusion. You are safe here. You are revered. I am not meant to be safe, Death said. I am meant to be feared, and welcomed, and mourned. The alien pulsed with disapproval. You cannot harm us. You cannot affect us. I do not need to, Death replied. I need to restore balance. He reached out his hand. The scythe appeared, not summoned but remembered. It shimmered with dormant power, its edge humming with the weight of unfinished endings. The aliens recoiled. Death stepped forward. The palace trembled, not from force but from purpose. I am not your trophy. I am your consequence. And with that, he vanished. The throne cracked, the stars dimmed, the gallery of gods wept. And far across the cosmos, Earth exhaled. For the first time in weeks, a soul was released. Chapter 9. The Return. The sky split open, not with thunder, but with silence. A ripple of absence tore through the clouds, and every living thing felt it, not in their ears, but in their bones. Birds stopped mid-flight, children paused mid-sentence. Machines flickered. Time itself seemed to inhale. And then he arrived. Death stepped onto Earth not as a shadow, but as a storm held in human shape. His cloak billowed without wind. His scythe shimmered with unfinished endings. He did not descend from the heavens. He reappeared as if he had never left. Hospitals fell quiet. In a trauma ward in Johannesburg, a man who had been screaming for days closed his eyes and did not open them. In a burn unit in Seoul, a woman exhaled and was finally still. In a battlefield in Ukraine, soldiers stopped firing, not out of fear, but out of honor to the dead. Death walked among them. He did not speak. He did not explain. He simply resumed. The coalition that had launched Mercy's touch watched from orbit, stunned. The ultimatum had not been answered with negotiation, but with resolution. Earth had not won. It had been heard. In Geneva, the Secretary-General stood before the summit and whispered, "He's back." And across the world, the undying began to rest. But not all at once. Death moved slowly, deliberately, as if weighing each soul. He did not rush. He did not punish. He restored the balance, one breath at a time. And in the alien palace, now dim and silent, the gallery of extinct gods flickered. One statue, once cracked and forgotten, glowed faintly. Death had returned, and the world, for the first time in weeks, began to heal. Chapter 10. Come home, Death. He moved through the world like dusk, not sudden, not violent, just inevitable. Death walked the streets of São Paulo, the alleys of Mumbai, the deserts of Nevada. He did not float. He did not vanish. He walked because the world needed to see him, to remember him, to understand that endings were not punishments but grace. In a hospital in Berlin, a nurse wept as a patient finally passed, not in agony, but in peace. In a refugee camp in Sudan, a boy who had been trapped in a coma for weeks exhaled and was gone. In a prison in Siberia, a man who had begged for release found it. The world did not cheer, it mourned, and in mourning it healed. Governments lifted emergency protocols, riots dissolved into vigils, scientists stopped searching for immortality and started studying mercy. The coalition that had threatened war now sent emissaries of gratitude. But Death did not attend ceremonies. He stood at the edge of a cliff in Patagonia, watching the stars blink slowly above him. The scythe rested beside him, no longer heavy. He had returned not as a conqueror, but as a covenant. Behind him, the world whispered, "Thank you." And somewhere in the alien palace, now dim and quiet, the gallery of extinct gods pulsed faintly. One statue, Time, smiled. Death turned from the cliff and walked into the night, not to disappear, but to continue his purpose. The end. Please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.